wow, I achieved the thing, but I don't feel all that different. You're not going to be any more fulfilled. You're not going to be any more present. You're not going to be any more grateful than you are before you see yourself on the billboard. Practices like mindfulness and meditation and random acts of kindness and slowing down and, all the things. We know what to do. We just treat it like it's optional. Yet our expectations are way up here.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I'm so glad you're here. I just had a really fascinating conversation with Light Watkins, who is a very well-known meditation teacher and kind of a scholar and a teacher. This is his fifth book called The Year You Transform, The Quickest Path to Change Your Life for the Better. And it looks like that. And we had so many things in common and know so many of the same people. But anyway, that's not what the interview is about. What the interview is about is change. And what is the best way, the most accessible way for us as human beings to change what's not working in our lives. He's got a wonderful TED Talk, which I'll put the link in the show notes as well. I think he has almost 1 million views on his TED Talk. So I hope that you enjoy this fascinating conversation with Light Watkins as much as I enjoyed having that conversation. I am super excited to welcome Light Watkins to the Terri Cole Show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Me too. All right. So many things to discuss. We have so many things in common, so many things we do, teaching meditation, all the things. But I want to know, I always ask people to start, it's almost like if you were a Marvel movie character, right? What is your origin story that got you here, that got you where you are sort of right now in your life? What got you interested in this? Just give us the background.
When I think about that, because I ask people the same question on my
You do?
podcast. Yeah,
The
but
same way?
well, I like to find out the backstory, what led you to the thing that you're doing, and I found that a lot of people have like a dark night of the soul moment, or they hit rock bottom, or something bad happens in their
Right.
life. And I kind of had the opposite experience. I didn't have something bad happen. I've just always been really curious about how life works, if that makes any sense. Like I probably should have been an engineer, but I didn't know anything about that growing up. And so when I got out into the real world after college, I had my first and what ended up being my only like real quotes real 9 to 5 job at a ad agency, which is what I studied in college. And I kind of knew pretty much right away this is not going to be the path for me. And so I took a leap of faith and I left that, and I didn't know what exactly I was going to do to earn an income, but I had done some rinky-dink fashion shows in college, and I thought, you know what? Let me try fashion. And I was in Chicago at the time, and I ended up going to all these modeling agencies, and I got rejected by everyone. I didn't know why. I thought, I'm a tall person. I'm not, I'm not, easy on the eyes for the most part. I thought I was
You're
gonna
like,
get
I'm
this
pretty
opportunity.
cute.
Yeah, why not? Why not take me? But they didn't for whatever reason, and I didn't know why. And so I kept trying different angles to get into fashion because I felt like that would be a great way to see the world. Eventually, made my way to Paris and then to New York. And I was in New York for a while, waiting tables and then doing the whole fashion thing. And then one day I'm waiting tables in Times Square in the theater district. And I see this bus go by the front of the restaurant at the corner of my eye. And I was like, wait, was that? And I went over to the window and another bus came down, the 8th Avenue bus came down the street. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. I was on the side of the bus in a Gap advertisement. So long story short, about 3 months prior to that day, I had been, I was booked to do some photos for the Gap, the retailer, the Gap. And I didn't think much of it because it didn't pay a lot of money. And back then, when a job didn't pay a lot of money, there was a high chance that you're never gonna see the light of
Yeah.
day with that job. But somehow the stars aligned, and and I was chosen to be the face of the fall, whatever year it was, Gap campaign, and I was literally everywhere. And the first thought I had was, "Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. I'm waiting tables, and my face is all over New York City." And but I couldn't afford to quit the job, so then I
Right.
take another leap of faith, thinking that I didn't come here to wait tables. I came here to be in fashion. So let me do the thing that I was here to do, and I'll just figure out how I'm going to pay my bills later. And I walked around the corner from that restaurant after my shift, and I saw the billboard of me in the middle of Times Square on a Gap ad, which is, by all metrics, I had arrived. This is what all models aspire to. And I noticed that I didn't feel more fulfilled inside. That was like really the most defining moment of that part of my professional life was, wow, I achieved the thing, but I don't feel all that different. And so that was a big question mark for me. And I was
Yeah.
like, what is that about? Because I thought that's what everybody wants.
Right.
And once you get it, you're going to be happy. You're going to, you're going to feel differently. And so anyway, I started getting into yoga classes because you got a lot of downtime in fashion. And then I started getting into meditation. This is in the 90s. So this is well before the wellness industry was even a thing. And they were talking about this idea of inner fulfillment, which I had never really considered before. And so I started reading these spiritual books. Conversations with God, I would say, was my gateway spiritual book
Oh my God, mine too.
by Neil Donald Walsh.
Oh yeah,
I read
mine too.
I read all three or however many volumes there were, like
Yep.
multiple times.
Yep.
They were all dog-eared and highlighted, and yeah, and then eventually I started looking more forward to yoga and meditation experiences than I was looking forward to going to castings for modeling, and that was my sign to take another leap of faith and get out of New York and go to the place where a lot of spiritual work was happening, which was LA. So I did that. I ended up in a yoga teacher training. I started teaching yoga, and then a few months later, I met my spiritual teacher in Los Angeles, and I started studying with him. And then I went to India to learn how to become a meditation teacher. This is in 2007. And then when I got back from there, I started becoming a full-time meditation teacher. Turns out I was pretty good at it because I never felt like anything was happening. So I knew how to relate to people who also felt that way, which turns out is the majority of people. And then I started giving talks and writing books, and and now here we are having this conversation.
It's so interesting, and I see all these parallels. And I mean, I was in entertainment the same exact time that you were. I was an agent, and I was running the TV department for elite modeling agencies. So I was like, I
Wow.
wonder who were you working with, like what were you doing? But
Yeah, I did a
anyway, we
little
can,
stint at Elite for like a hot minute
on East 22nd Street, that
on
one.
East 22nd Street. Yep. Were
Oh,
you
I
in New
love
York
it.
in the mid '90s as
I
well?
sure was.
Wow,
And it
interesting.
was so interesting. I had very similar sort of epiphanies and a similar journey into
Mm,
meditation and again, this is like you before it was really a thing.
hmm.
Yoga, meditation, ashrams, just trying to find my my way, and then also became a meditation teacher anyway. And then I quit and became a psychotherapist. So that was sort of the way that I went. But the idea of I love the idea of finding sort of the inner landscape, just sharing that, like, that's an epiphany right there of like,
Yeah.
oh, what's going on in there? Like, I didn't even know until really meditation and this self reflection that there was anything going on in there. I didn't know there was this parallel process. So your latest book is this beautiful little book, and I love the size of this book. It's like so easy to throw in my pocketbook. But anyway, it's called The Year You Transform: The Quickest Path to Changing Your Life for the Better. And I just want to talk about, so what do people, in your estimation, right? You wrote this whole book on change. What do people get wrong most of the time about the change process?
So I identify three paths to change in the beginning of the book. And the first path is the one that I think a lot of people fantasize about, which is I call it the eat, pray, love path to change. Which, if you saw the movie or if you read the book, it's Elizabeth Gilbert's story of leaving her marriage, traveling around the world, going to Italy, India, and Bali, falling in love, and having that experience change the course of her life. And so a lot of people think if I want to change, I need to blow up my life in some way. I need to quit my job. I need to leave my partner. I need to change things up, go to India, go to Bali, become a monk, study in an ashram and this kind of thing. And I'm not saying it doesn't work for some people, but what the reality of that situation is you go to Bali, you do a few excursions, you stay at some Airbnb, you go to some cafes, right? You go to the monkey forest, you go to see the elephants, and you come back and you're pretty much the same person that you were when you left, but just with some cool memories and videos to share in your Instagram. I think what people really want is they want internal change. When they say, I want to go and do things differently, change my life, etc. It's not really the change itself that you want. You want to feel a greater sense of presence. And that's what going to foreign and exotic places serves for us. It makes us more present just because it's more unfamiliar.
Right.
But the people in Bali and Thailand, they don't feel that presence
Right.
because it's something they see all the time. They would feel it if they came to your town, wherever you are, right?
Right.
So, but that's the outside in approach to change, which again, it can happen, but it takes a lot more time. And the other approach that people I think default to is when you resist doing anything different. You just feel like, okay, better the devil you know. I'm familiar with this environment. I'm just going to ride it out. Maybe I'll get lucky. And then you start to experience crisis. You start to experience implosion because anything that's too sedentary, it stops circulating. The energy, the chi stops circulating and it starts decaying. And so that's when we get things like diagnoses and health issues and other things because we were resistant to change. But there's something in the middle there, which I call the tortoise approach. And the tortoise approach is where you intentionally and voluntarily inoculate yourself with discomfort or what we would also call stressful experiences in little micro doses. You microdose stress in a way that gets you out of the future and out of the past and right into the moment that you ultimately want to be in, which is the present. And you can do this through things like taking a cold shower. You can go for a walk. You can practice forgiving somebody who you swore you'd never forgive. You can do a physical feat, like try to do a pull-up or, run a mile if you've never been
Right.
able to do that before. Saying yes to things that scare you or practicing not complaining for just one day. Can you go a whole day without vocalizing a complaint? You'll be so present to what's in your mind,
Yeah.
to what you're tempted to want to say or write, that you're hopefully going to be able to edit yourself a little bit for that day. No one's saying you have to edit yourself for life, but it's just an interesting practice that, again, it helps you become ultimately more and more immune to the things that are happening around you that may otherwise yank you out of the moment.
There's something so great about the exposure that you're talking about. So it's basically like, I wouldn't call it exposure therapy, but there's something about exposing yourself to things that create discomfort and realizing that discomfort doesn't kill us. And that we've gotten, your comfort zone can really become a comfortable prison very readily and very easily. And it's like you're expanding it's like the window of what you can tolerate, right? Your window of tolerance, as Dan Siegel would talk about. And I think that it's similar to what you're saying. I invite my therapy clients often to collect rejection, like let's just not live our lives doing everything. Because I'll have the therapy client talking about someone they're dating, and they'll be like, I don't know, I think they're pulling back. I feel like they're texting less. I'm not sure. I'm like, can we establish if you even like this motherfucker, please, before you decide that any rejection that you must avoid at all costs? Let's bring it back in. And this also speaks to what you're saying with slowing down, right? Slow down this reaction of like, must avoid rejection. How about, do I even like this person? Does it matter who's rejecting me? But what happens when you can tolerate more discomfort? Then what are sort of the next steps with people? Do you see that with the people that you're coaching and people that you're talking to, are they then making bigger moves to do something different in their lives?
Well, they end up getting what they were ultimately seeking in the first place. It's one thing to think that once you have the experience, once you see yourself on the billboard, you're going to feel more fulfilled or more present or whatever you think is going to happen, more grateful. But the reality is that you're not going to be any more fulfilled, you're not going to be any more present, you're not going to be any more grateful than you are before you see yourself on the billboard.
Right.
And the billboard is just a metaphor for whatever you think is the achievement that's going to lead to the feeling. It's all that's going to happen is that achievement is going to become a showcase for what you truly feel inside. And so there's a whole other, and I'm not anti-achievement, okay?
Sure.
I love money. I love, flying private. I love all the
Yeah.
comfortable things. But the question is, are those things going to lead you to the feeling tone that you ultimately want to have? And from a spiritual perspective, there's a whole other protocol of behaviors and exposure that you want to include in your life, your day-to-day lifestyle, that is going to lead to that experience from the inside out. So
Right.
while you're pursuing the changes you're pursuing in your profession or in your family or in your relationships, dating and everything like that, you also want to be doing your inner work, your inner exercises. And I equate it to, a lot of people are doing bench pressing for their chest and expecting their legs to get stronger. That's bench pressing has no effect on your legs,
Right.
unfortunately. Yes, you're in the gym. Yes, you're lifting weights, but it has no effect on your legs. If you
Right.
want your legs to get stronger, you have to go to do some deadlifts and some squats and some leg curls and all of those things, right? And
Yep.
so the deadlifts for fulfillment and for gratitude and for inner happiness and peace are practices like mindfulness and meditation and random acts of kindness and slowing down and all the things. We know what to do. We just treat it like it's optional. Yet our expectations are way up here when it comes to why isn't this person making me happy? Why isn't this job making me fulfilled?
Yep.
I would argue you probably would have chosen a different job if you were more fulfilled inside.
And if what you're saying about the feelings, right? This is very accurate. Like, it's almost like chasing the thing, thinking the thing is gonna give the feeling, when it's really about identifying the feeling and then asking, is the thing gonna bring more of the feeling that I want? And when I left
Yeah.
entertainment, it was like as my friend Danielle Laporte would say, like, what's your core desired feeling? Mine has always been freedom. And realizing that working in that kind of an industry, for a million reasons I left, but just working for someone else so many hours
Mhm.
a day
Yep.
was never ever going to create what I wanted. I thought the success and the money and the cash and the privilege and the people and the famous clients, that was going to do it. I kept thinking. And then when I got to what was considered sort of like the little top of the hill, I was like, oh, no. Anywhere you go, there you are with your unresolved bullshit, because it's still on me to resolve what is unresolved. And that was when I was like, well, I can do more therapy and do more meditation and do more things that, I don't need to actually stay in this industry. I want to ask you though about your, like, in your family growing up, did you have examples of people? Because what you're talking about and the choices you've made in your life, there's a certain amount of differentiating that you've done. You've chosen paths that were not like the safe path or like the sure path or like that. And everyone was like, what a great and responsible choice. So how was your family of origin around? Did you have examples of this, or are you kind of just the breakout of the family?
The credit that I give to my family of origin is that we had a very stable environment growing up. And I think because of that stability, I was more comfortable with instability. And I think it can be the opposite sometimes. If someone grows up in an unstable environment, they're more reluctant to take leaps of faith and bet on
Sure.
themselves. And I get that. I get it. You crave stability. And so
Yep.
for whatever reason, maybe spiritual karma, whatever, I inherited that family and I had the stability. We were never like rich or anything like that, but we were stable. We had, we had 3 meals a day, and my parents were both there, and I had three
Yep.
brothers, and we all played with each other. There was no drama. No one was strung out on anything, And so, yeah, I credit that with having more courage to explore the different colors of life, because I've been doing that pretty much my whole adult life, and I've never been motivated by money and or success or accolades. While I love being recognized for my work, it's
Sure.
not something that necessarily drives me. And yeah, these are interesting questions. Again, if you read stuff like Conversations with God, which sort of peels back the layers on all of it, it started making a lot more sense to me that we all have our path. And if you see someone who's unhoused, living on the street, that's a spiritual being having a human experience that's probably teaching them some stuff. And if you see someone who's living in Billionaires Row in New York City, same thing. You can't assume anybody is necessarily better off than anyone else, because we don't know what their spiritual path entails. And I know that you can't prove that with science, but I'm a big proponent of adopting a belief system that empowers you. And for me, that empowers me. And we all have to do that for ourselves. We have to adopt a belief system that empowers us. So if you believe everything happens for a reason, and that makes you feel like a more authentic version of yourself when things don't appear to go your way, then I think that's a very powerful belief system to adopt. If you adopt a belief system that everything is random and it makes you feel small and contracted, like you're just a feather in the wind blowing around, I would
Right.
say examine that belief system and try to find another one that makes you feel more empowered, whether it's a religious belief or a
Yep.
spiritual belief or philosophical belief. Find something. It's up to each and every one of us to find something that allows us to feel like we can be our truest self.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a friend many, many years ago who said something to me that was very similar, but kind of life altering at the time. I think I was in New York, and I was dating this like short pharmacist. Like I went on a date with this guy, and he didn't call me the next day or whenever it was. And I said to my friend, this person, and she was the one who was like, "Did you even like this guy?" I was like, "I don't even know," but I'm noting that he didn't call. And she said, "Tara, what would be an empowering thing to believe? So you're making up a story that he didn't call you because he didn't like you." I was like, right. She was like, well, what would be empowering? And I said, kidding, that I got hit by a bus. I didn't wish him to be hit by a bus, but I was saying like that he couldn't. And she said, since you're never going to know the answer, why not exactly what you're saying? Believe something that's more empowering and doesn't make you feel bad about yourself, because there's no, we will not conclusively know unless you're going to call this person up, which I wasn't. I wanted to say something about the family system stuff you shared, though, that it sounds like that, when people are so obsessed now on these interwebs about attachment styles. Do you hear this a lot in your world
Yeah,
of
of course.
meditation? It was just, I mean, you
Yeah.
can't. There's no avoiding it, right? Like it's friggin' everywhere. But it sounds like there's secure attachment, because what that does actually create, when you feel securely attached to your caregivers, that there is this freedom to sort of be more spontaneous, or to color outside the lines, or to choose something that's more adventurous than someone else. Anyway, just side note of that, I want to go back to the book stuff. In the book, you talk about sort of that you believe that anyone can change
Yeah.
themselves or their life. So if people listening, watching this on YouTube, if they're like, I need to change, I want to, what would you say is the best way to just get started? How do people just get on this path?
So I want to just clarify something. When we say anyone can change, I'm not really referring to characteristics or personality even as much, although I do think that that's possible to change too. I think the biggest and most profound changes that we can experience, and it can happen in a moment or it can happen over 10 years, is our perspective. Our perspective on ourselves, our perspective on life, our perspective on what truly matters, our
Yep.
perspective on what we're here to do. All those things can change relatively quickly. And it's kind of like one of those, it's like a FedEx package. You don't know what's inside. You don't know what's inside of any experience that you're walking into. It could be a diagnosis. It could be getting fired. It could be the guy not or girl not calling you back or
Right.
texting you back, right? Those could lead to, you just never know where you're being led to. And I find that really interesting and curious. And if we can sort of tap into the mystique of those of our moments, it can it can wake us up to everything beautiful that's happening in that moment. So I've got an exercise on gratitude, which, every Thanksgiving, okay, what are you grateful for? Say your blessings. That's all nice and well and good. But what I encourage people to do is take something that really challenged you, something that perhaps brought you to your knees, and reverse engineer that to connect it to all the wonderful things that happened to you in your life. Because I'm sure if you really do an assessment, you'll see that, oh, when I was sulking in the diner because that person left me on the date or, whatever the
Right.
experience was, that's when I met that waiter who then invited me to their church, and then I went and had this wonder, and that's how I joined this church. And,
Yep.
we've had so many wonderful memories from this experience.
Right.
Or, that's what inspired me to go on that yoga retreat by myself. And I ended up in Costa Rica, and that's how I had this other experience. And that shaped my life. And that's when I decided to write my book about Costa Rica. It wouldn't have happened had I
Right.
not been left on that date. So try to be grateful for things that didn't feel all that great in the moment. And if you can practice doing that, eventually
Yeah.
you'll start to decrease the lag time between a so-called bad thing happening and your ability to reframe it in the moment. Kind of like what your friend was doing for you in that moment, which is
Right.
so difficult for us to do when we're experiencing the pain in real time. But I'll never forget one day I used to go jogging with a really good friend of mine in LA at this place called Runyon Canyon, which
Sure.
is up in the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah, I know it.
And we go every morning at like 6 o'clock, like clockwork. And I remember one morning just complaining about my ex and complaining and complaining. And finally he said, what's something you're grateful for about your ex? And we were just running in silence because I had nothing to say. I was like, why is he asking me this right now? Because you want that companionship in your complaint.
Yes.
But I decided to play along, and I started to list off things, little things like, oh, she's got, such a soft touch, and I love how easily she smiles. And I started just listing off things, and I noticed that the energy started to lift. And I started to notice, oh wow, it's so beautiful out here. The sunset, and I noticed the colors and the light and things I wasn't aware of
Sure.
prior to that when I was in the middle of my complaining. And that's what complaining does. It brings the energy down.
Yep.
It narrows our focus. We get into this sort of tunnel vision around what's wrong,
Yep.
which decreases our understanding of the possibilities for ourselves and for other people.
Yep.
And so the reality that we're creating in those moments is actually true. This person is a monster. This person is a narcissist. This person is negligent, because that's all I'm able to see. It doesn't mean
Yep.
that that's the reality for them. It means
Right.
that for me, that's my reality that I'm creating. And then every time I look at that person or someone who reminds me of that person, I've got this lens on of,
Yeah.
they have the rose colored lens, they have the shit colored lens. I've got
Yep.
the shit colored lens on, and that's
Yep.
all I'm focusing on is, when are they going to leave me? When are they going to neglect
Yep.
me? When are they going to gaslight me? And then it ends up repelling that person, and we end up again continuing to blame the other person. See, I knew that the world was just full of narcissists.
Yeah.
It's like, hold on, you're co-creating this
Literally.
by your own perception. So
Yeah.
when you expand that, you start to attract more of what you want. And that's essentially what the law of attraction or manifesting comes down to is, again, it's inside out. It's what are the possibilities that you're entertaining inside based on how you're relating to the people and to the experiences in your day-to-day, moment-to-moment interactions.
Yeah. Like, what is the vibe? that you're bringing, which sounds so like trait, sort of. But I always visualize it like energetically. We're all energy. People are all, this is all energy. Everything looks solid, but it's just molecules moving quickly. So you figure you've got energy going out into the world with little hooks on the end, and we're just hooking like experiences coming back so much of the time. And I feel like there's something really powerful about what you're saying, that being aware that there's both, and your friend, that's a great sort of favor that he did to you, to have you open your mind. When I have clients who are ending relationships or mourning a relationship, I have a whole process we go through of actually mourning, where we do both things, where we say, this is all the shit I'm not going to miss at all. And these are all the things I will. And we make a three-dimensional human being, because you wouldn't have loved them if they didn't have good qualities as well. And because here's the thing, if I don't do that process with them, the grief doesn't move, because we're so attached to them just being terrible people, and they're just, I'm like, nobody is just that, or you wouldn't have been drawn to them. So the moving, and how such a beautiful visual, that story that you told, because I could see like your eyes opening and you being like, wow, look at the sun, and like suddenly this tunnel vision of negativity is open. And I really think there's something profound in looking for the gems of wisdom in the shit stew that we get served in life. Like, every situation that feels like, oh, this is just the worst. What you're saying is, I firmly agree. Like, yeah, and what's in it for you? If we look at like the butterfly effect, right? You'd be
Hmm.
like, if that one thing didn't happen, we would not be talking right now. If one thing in your life didn't happen, or one thing in my life didn't happen the way that it did. You guys, the book is called The Year You Transform, The Quickest Path to Changing Your Life for the Better, by Light Watkins. Check it out, check it out. So where can people find you? Where, if people want to find you, follow you? Obviously, you can buy this book everywhere fine books are sold. But where can we find you?
Well, my main hub is my website, lightwatkins.com, and then on the socials at Light Watkins.
Yeah, and what's amazing, can I ask you about your name?
Yeah, sure.
Is that your name?
So that's another story. But back in 2005, I got an inner download to take on a new name. And
Wow.
it's the name itself came out of a conversation where I just moved to Los Angeles a couple years before, and I was talking to a friend of mine about all the people that I met who had rebranded themselves with these new names. And they were names like Tree and Sky and Truth and, typical LA names.
Yep.
And I'm known in my friend circle as the person who asks hypothetical questions. So I asked my friend, I said, if you had to change your name to a word like truth or sky or tree or whatever, what would you change it to? And he said ocean. And he said, what would you change your name to? And I was like, I don't know. I'm also known for not having an answer to my own hypothetical questions. So he
Very
started
clever.
getting frustrated with me, and then eventually I just blurted out light, and that was it. But the idea to change my name kept percolating, and I went to one of the other guys that I knew who had changed their names, and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking of potentially changing my name. Just curious what it entails. How do you do it?" And he said, "All you have to do is start introducing yourself as Light, and then eventually people will start calling you that." And so 2 weeks from that day happened to be my birthday, and I decided on my birthday I was going to start introducing myself as Light, and so that was back in 2005. It's been over 20 years now.
Wow. Well, I love it. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. It was really nice talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Sure thing.